Aren't you tired of assessing your students through the same technique all the time? It must be stressful for both of you. So much that you are here looking for an alternative to try something new, isn't it? Of course, it will always depend on your purpose. It means exactly what do you want to assess? As we know, oral presentations are forms of assessment in which students make use of speech to express their knowledge and understanding of a topic. Or it allows you to assess a student's skills such as pronunciation, audibility, enunciation, clarity, organization. It is up to you to add the criteria that you consider essential to achieve your goals of assessment. If you have decided to use presentations, then remember that first of all you have to give some tips to your students. We all know that present a topic and materials in front of a class, it is not as easy as it seems to be. Well, it is very important to provide students some tips in order for them to have a successful presentation. Give them tips for researching, organizing, and even how to maintain the interest of the audience. If you want to know exactly what pieces of advice you can give them, take a look on the following part.
And yeah, thank you for that nice introduction to the topic. And as mentioned, you need to know some things in order to give a wonderful presentation. That's why I'm here today. I'm going to give you some tips and notes in order for you to give the most wonderful presentation ever. So let's begin. Number one, know your material. This means you have to have your content in hand. You have to make sure you do a good research, you read, you investigate, you look for things you don't know, so you have your topic fresh and clear. Many problems that may arise during your presentation can be easily solved if you are well prepared and if you know your topic. Okay. Number two, show interest. This is very important. You can start by looking for something of unique or special interest for you about the topic and show your enthusiasm about this. Remember, if you are an enthusiastic presenter, you will get an enthusiastic audience. Now let's talk about the audience. Number three, know your audience. This part you have to do yourself many questions. Okay, for example, whom you'll be presenting to, how involved is going to be your audience into the presentation, what level of sophistication do you need to use, do you need to talk to them informally or formally, what questions do you expect to be asked, and of course remember that the way you present will determine if comments, questions, and arguments are promoted or not. So keep that in mind. Number four, synthesize your information. This means that the fewer notes you make, the more natural your presentation will seem. Basically, keep it simple. Go direct to the point, get a clear idea of the main points of the topic. For this, you can use the speech parts, which are introduction, body, and conclusion, so that you can be clear about what you're saying. In a nutshell, keep it simple, okay? And understandable, of course. Number five, make use of visual aids. As we know, visual aids can be really helpful to draw and maintain the interest of your audience. They can also be used to highlight the main points of your presentation. However, if you're not referring to them, if you're not talking to them like in this moment, you can set them aside or just cover them up, okay? You don't want your audience to get distracted, all right? Okay, number six. Yeah, six. Number six, this is very important. Practice, okay? Talk to yourself. You can use a mirror. You can stand in front of the mirror. You can stand in front of the mirror and talk to yourself out loud. You have to hear what you're saying to practice, okay? Do the motions, the gestures with your hands, with your face, All the motions and gestures you'll be using during your presentation, try to make this as real as possible, as if you were going to present at that exact moment. You can start doing this by practicing with notes in hand. With your notes, you are reading your notes, and as time goes by, you'll see you won't need them anymore. So practicing is really important. And the final one, the tip number 7. Yeah, number 7. Okay, to be good at presenting things, it requires skills. This basically means you need to be prepared and you need to be practiced. You need to be observant about the environment, about your classmates. If you are not the first one to present, see what your classmates do, see what it works for them or it doesn't. Reflect about it. What can you do to improve yourself? What can you do to improve your presentation? You need to reflect, you need to be conscious, you need to be aware about what you're doing. So those are the 7 tips and notes in order to give a good presentation. Okay, let's talk about designing material to project. This is also very important. The material you're gonna use to project needs to be efficient and useful for you. So in order to have a good material, you can make yourself 3 questions. What is the purpose of the material? What you'll include in your PowerPoint presentation? What information are you gonna put? And of course, the information you project must not be a distractor. Okay, for this, there are some points to remember. Your design should be easy to follow. You don't have to include too many explanations, too many long explanations. To make it easier for your students or for your audience, sorry, include headlines, titles, keywords, not too many details. And I know there are some people that like to use fonts. For this, you have to ask: Is it too large? Is it large enough to be read easily? And of course, the colors. The colors are an important part. There are some colors that don't show up well in the presentation. Okay, so now during your presentation, okay, for the presentation in general, what to do before the presentation? Make sure to check the material. Also check the projector, the position, if it is plugged in, etc. If you're gonna use a projector. And finally, during your presentation, when using a projector, don't get in the way of your projector, okay? Don't cross in front of the presentation, and use a stick or a laser to point the things that you consider important and remarkable. And let's move on to the next topic.
Hello everybody. Well, now we are going to talk about holistic and analytic marking. We need to clarify these 2 concepts. First of all, holistic marking refers to the impressions during the presentations. For example, Desmond says that in the most extreme case of holistic marking is where a single impression mark is given for overall quality. On the other hand, analytic marking focuses on aspects like writing or speaking. This kind of marking requires more attention and even specific criteria. Well, now let's move on to another interesting topic, rating scales. It is a way to assess the production of written or spoken tasks. However, we need to have in mind some issues when we examine or evaluate these kind of activities. For example, what kind of scales we need to have? General or specific criteria? Are the criterion descriptions self-contained or implicitly normed reference? Well, as we know, assessment it is used to identify if presentations are producing benefits. So, now I'm going to help you to assess your students' performance during a presentation. We need to have in mind some elements or steps. For example, number 1, how students handle the topic. Number 2, any interference to look for information. Number 3, technical aspects. Number 4, technical issues. And number 5, the interaction with the audience. However, there are more elements that we need to consider when we are evaluating. For example, content, organization, and delivery. Well, Donaldson considered 4 aspects more to assess these activities: the content, the evidence of background reading, the presentation, and discussion skills. On the other hand, the model of Guskis presents another elements: participants' reactions, participants' learning, and participants' use of development. So, using this format can help the evaluator to recognize the assessment of every student and compare the opinions of the audience with the opinions of the teacher. Now, let's see some advantages and disadvantages of using presentations. Number 1. Presentations are good options to assess abilities and competences. How students speak, the gestures, the contact with the audience, etc. Number 2. Presentations are excellent for self-assessment and peer assessment. Sometimes students get nervous and their partners can help during this assess or during this presentation. Number 3. Students can learn from watching each other's performance and develop their own skills. Now let's consider some disadvantages. For example, presentations in a large class, it's not a good idea. It could be tedious and takes a lot of time. On the other hand, some students could be terrified at giving presentations or talking in front of a group. They could be afraid of showing their speaking skills. So guys, thanks for your attention. Now let's move on with the beautiful Leslie.
And last but not least important, remember that you have to pay attention to what you ask your students to present. So you can modify the criteria, the rubric, or the checklist depending on what you are going to mark and the indications given. Also, you can try to give the students or the audience an observation sheet so they will reflect on what the presenter exposed, and it will also help you to improve your general assessment.